I didn't think I'd be making a video so soon. I was on Facebook. Don't know why I was on Facebook. I saw a snapshot of the new Pride and Prejudice film that will be made by Netflix. And I was slightly apprehensive because it's Netflix and Persuasion didn't meet the standards really, mostly when it came to the female protagonist. And also, it reminded me that I have this idea, as you would see from the title of the video I have. Was Elizabeth Bennet right to reject Mr. Collins' proposal? Pride and Prejudice, as it would be for many Jane Austen readers, is one of my favorite novels. However, compared to the rest of Jane Austen's work, there's almost something slightly unrealistic about the events that happen. When I say there's something slightly unrealistic about Pride and Prejudice, there's something unrealistic about Elizabeth Bennet's character to me compared to other Jane Austen's female protagonists. And I didn't realize this until I read the introduction of Pride and Prejudice from the Penguin Classic. And they described Elizabeth Bennet as having a certain modern femininity. And that's when it clicked to me that there's something slightly modern about Elizabeth Bennet compared to the time period that she was living in the 19th century. Compared to other protagonists, say Emma Woodhouse or Fanny in Mansfield's Park, where they have a slightly passive demeanor to them, slightly, Elizabeth Bennet has a different form of demeanor and personality that would fit into the modern day. And in fact, if Netflix were to try to do the style that they were trying to do when it came to Persuasion, where Anne looks at the camera and she starts making weird faces, I feel like that would make more sense with Elizabeth Bennet's character, knowing how she is. However, we can understand that the reason why Elizabeth Bennet's character feels so modern is because we need to recognize that Jane Austen was very heavily influenced by Mary Wollstonecraft. And we can see that in her work, in her critique on the personality of Mrs. Bennet and Lydia, and arguing how a lack of proper education has made them to be frivolous, vacuous, almost empty-headed, compared to Elizabeth Bennet, who was kind of portrayed as the ideal type of woman, someone who is not vacuous, someone who is able to reason, someone who is clearly quick-witted, and someone you can have a conversation with. And we can also see elements of Wollstonecraft's influence when she does reject Mr. Collins. When she does reject him, she does say to him, "Can I speak plainer? Do not consider me now as an elegant female intending to plague you, but as a rational creature, speaking the truth from her heart." Now, the reason why Elizabeth Bennet says that she is a rational creature is because during that time period, women were kind of, well, very obviously seen as second-class citizens, as they did not have the right to vote, did not have the right to own any property, money, etc., work the same way men would work. Women have always worked, but just more women's work. She is highlighting to Mr. Collins that she's not a child. She's not a dumb woman. She knows that she will not marry. She does not want to marry him because she knows that they're not a good fit. He will not make her happy. She will not make him happy. In a way, Elizabeth refuses to be objectified and refuses to be silenced by whatever perception Mr. Collins has based on his, we would view it as misogynistic because retrospectively we're looking back, but his very misogynistic views on women. However, initially, yes, we would say that Elizabeth Bennet was right to reject him because she's a woman that has autonomy and agency. She can make her own decisions. She's a rational creature. However, realistically, you could say she made the wrong decision. And here's why. The idea of marrying for love is a relatively modern concept. Marriage before, the idea of love was more so like a business transaction. Women, especially, married for stability because they could not make their own way into the world. They could not earn a sufficient amount of money. So they had to marry to feel secure and safe in the very patriarchal environment that they were living in. And in the case for Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Collins, by her rejecting his proposal, not only is she risking her own stability, but also the stability of her family. Because remember, Elizabeth is one of 5 daughters. Yeah, so one of 5 daughters. They have no son. And usually, Mr. Bennet, which by the way, I have beef with Mr. Bennet. He was not a good father. He thinking that, oh, will eventually have a son. He does not put dowries away for his daughters in case he doesn't have a son, and plus, so they're able to marry. He does not have a son, so he cannot rely on the son to, when he does pass away, to inherit his everything he owns and take care of his wife and his daughters. And not only that, the girls don't have dowry, so they can't really marry. Hence why the mum is so eager for the daughters to marry well. And with Mr. Collins presenting his interest in Elizabeth, she marries, in her mind, she believes that she will marry him so they will still keep their childhood home. They have stability. They can be safe. Because if Mr. Collins did not marry into the family, he has every right to kick out the Bennets. Mr. Bennet dies, he inherits the estate. He has his wife, which is Charlotte Lucas. They are not obligated by blood or they're not obligated by blood or marital ties to help them financially. So they are at the very risk of being destitute and left to fend for themselves. I always like to think of Sense and Sensibility as what could have happened if not only Elizabeth rejected Mr. Collins, but also decided not to get Mr. Darcy. That could have been their future, especially if Jane had not made up with Mr. Bingley. That could have been their future. And Elizabeth risks that in what you could argue was for slightly selfish reasons. I'm paraphrasing. Elizabeth does say, nothing but the deepest love will sway me into matrimony. And even Jane Austen, while writing Pride and Prejudice, she recognizes that there's something slightly unrealistic about the character Jane or the events that happens, because she describes Pride and Prejudice as rather too light and bright and sparkling compared to her other novels. So there's something slightly unrealistic, and Elizabeth's dumb. I don't want to say dumb, because she's still having her own autonomy, but you could say something slightly selfish about Elizabeth's decision. Because again, she rejected Mr. Darcy, and she had every right to, because he did insult her when it came to the proposal. But what if Mr. Darcy, let his prejudice continue to get into the way? What if he actually felt offended with the way she rejected his proposal? He could have moved on, and she would not have had that second chance. If he had not come back and say, look, I'm going to ask you one more time, do you want to marry me? I'm not going to come back and ask you again. If she had not said yes then, her and her family would have been in complete ruin. Her mum and her 4 sisters, if, again, assuming that Jane had not reconciled with Mr. Bingley, they would have been completely screwed if she had decided not to marry Mr. Darcy and give him a second chance. So from a feminist perspective, especially from looking through the lens of Mary Wollstonecraft, initially, Elizabeth was right to say no, because that's her right to say no. But realistically, you could also argue she was wrong. She was very lucky that things turned out well. And thank God for plot armor.